Camille Carnance, and I'm a master's student here at Iowa State in the environmental science major. I'm here to talk to you today about my ongoing research with Dr. Thompson, Dr. Laxton, and Dr. Walter in urban stormwater management through our titled presentation, Assessing the Effectiveness of Stormwater Best Management Practices. Just a quick overview of the presentation. I'll first address the effects of stormwater and how that contributes to the production, the effects of urbanization and how that contributes to the production of stormwater. Then I'll talk to you about the issues we find in stormwater quantity and quality and how those issues can be controlled through best management practices. I'll then talk to you about my personal research objectives, the methods we took to assess BMPs, and then finally our results and conclusions. Human land use alterations associated with urbanization modify the hydrological systems. We see the attributes such as slope, hydraulic conductivity, soil type, and surface cover are affected by certain actions such as soil excavation, traffic of heavy equipment, mixing and irrigating, and other physical structural changes that are identified with the development of infrastructure. This graphic here is to demonstrate the transition of a landscape from its natural ground cover to urban density and urbanization and decreased permeability, which as a result creates increased runoff volumes, decreased groundwater recharge, and the deterioration of surface water bodies. Impermeable surfaces found in urban landscapes, such as concretes, roadways, and infrastructure, produce what is known as stormwater runoff. These urban characteristics increase flow velocity and runoff, which then forces itself into waterways and the receiving areas, and it causes stream banks to adjust their geomorphic properties. Along with the quantitative concerns like erosional problems, as you can see here, with this mass amount of sediment and water collecting at the base of a slope, there are also a number of pollutants identified with the quality of stormwater. Nutrients from fertilizers such as nitrogen and phosphorus, heavy metals from vehicles and industry, sediments from construction sites, and pathogens from domestic animals and sewage all impact the quality of stormwater runoff being discharged into our neighboring water bodies. Today, stormwater runoff is recognized as a major impairment as a major source of surface water impairment. Fortunately, stormwater management has considerably evolved over the last few decades. Traditionally, stormwater management had this end-of-pipe system where we wanted to convey water to off-site facilities as quickly as possible to these centralized municipal facilities. But these combined sewer channels and stormwater in the same conveyance systems, just leading to one big facility. This approach neglected the task of improving water quality and thus has created downstream pollutant problems. In recent years, however, there has been a great interest in shifting stormwater management away from these conveyance systems and towards decentralized micro-scale control measures at the source. These source control strategies, or best management practices, aim to mitigate runoff while preserving or maintaining the natural hydrology of a landscape. BMPs are part of the greater low-impact development approach to sustainable management and are also within the NPDES permitting program. The purpose of this approach is to reduce the need of paving pipe systems and inlet structures in order to increase the use of water and vegetated features, all while reducing costly engineered infrastructure and constant maintenance. Best management practices have been classified into several categories, including runoff control, pollution prevention, source or treatment control, local to regional design, as well as structural or non-structural. The intention is to reduce floods, peak flow, and to promote infiltration and pollutant removal through strategically placed BMPs that can receive or capture stormwater from the surrounding contributing environments as close to the source as possible. In terms of selection, designers must take into consideration the watershed terrain, community, environment, as well as location and permitting factors. In areas of great urban density, available space for BMPs can be an important constraint, and the range of space required to implement such BMPs is quite variable. When using vegetation to promote infiltration, designers must also consider strategies that are aesthetically pleasing to the community. Understanding which functions of stormwater control, whether it's infiltration, water retention, chemical absorption, or evapotranspiration are most appropriate for a site depend on the characteristics of the watershed. In our study, we focus on BMPs that are categorized as non-structural practices, which are designed to minimize the site disturbance and create a disconnection or reduction of impermeable surfaces. Examples of non-structural BMPs include wetlands, vegetated filter strips, soil compost application, or vegetated swales. Here are two examples of non-structural BMPs, one that utilizes permeable pavement and a retention facility, and one that uses more of a wetland approach. In our study, we chose to assess 3 best management practices: bioretention cells, restored prairie areas, and riparian buffers. The first of our practices that we assessed were bioretention cells. Bioretention cells are constructed depressions within the ground, and they are designed to infiltrate and store stormwater. Biocells are regionally based and vary in capacity, substrate media, and vegetation. They typically include a square or rectangular feature that has a rock chamber, a subdrain, a mulch layer, and an engineered soil mixture most often. This is an example of one of our BMPs or one of our sites. Water infiltrates through this concrete wall through inlet structures and is allowed to pool and infiltrate into the substrate profile. They usually include both aesthetically pleasing plants as well as a lot of native prairie vegetation. The second type of BMP we looked at were restored prairie areas. They once dominated the Midwest, and their climatic adaptation allows prairie plants to survive extreme weather events. The advantages, besides that of native prairie plants, include organic matter enrichment, erosion prevention, climate adaptability, and like traditional turf grass, they can cover a wide array of areas, like residential and commercial areas, but without that need for that excess fertilization to maintain lawns. This is another one of our sites. You can see it's just simple, aesthetically pleasing, and low maintenance. Lastly, we looked at the performance of vegetated riparian buffers. The floodplain or the riparian zone of a waterway can act as a buffer that traps sediments and upslope erosion while maintaining or promoting this infiltration before the water reaches the stream bank. A combination of trees and shrubs and native grasses and forbs are planted in a series of zones. These different, the root systems are advantageous in different types of infiltration or stopping certain sediments before reaching the stream bank. This photo up here is one of our sites as well. It's an urban adaptation of a riparian zone. So beyond the sidewalk, you can vaguely see this zone of native grasses and prairie plants moving into more of a shrub area, and then finally a wooded area where the stream lies in the back within this wooded zone. This also is a good example of where you can see our contributing turf grass lawn area. Several stormwater management practices have gained popularity, but limited effort has been made to monitor these practices after that first year of installation. So we wanted to see, or we thought that we should revisit these stormwater BMPs after years of use and see how they're functioning now today. We have 3 overarching objectives for our study. The first is we want to measure how these BMPs are performing in mitigating and controlling stormwater runoff, both in quantitative and qualitative parameters. The second is we wanted to determine the effectiveness of the relationship of these BMPs in comparison to their contributing areas. And finally, to quantify certain soil characteristics like bulk density and particle size analysis, as well as infiltration characteristics such as time to runoff, the runoff volumes that we were seeing, and how they promoted infiltration. So based on availability and years of establishment, we were able to select 3 bioretention cells, 3 restored prairie areas, and 2 urban riparian buffers, so a total of 8 sites. All of our locations were within the city boundaries of Ames or Ankeny, Iowa, in either a commercial, municipal, or recreational zone. The bioretention cells were created in 2011, and the restored prairie areas and urban riparian buffers were created by at least 2007. So, according to the United States Census, these 2 cities have been growing in population since 2010, by 10% in Ames, and by 25% in Ankeny. So all these sites have experienced growth during a period of urbanization and development. In this research, we defined our stormwater management practice by its receiving area and its contributing area. The receiving area is the BMP area itself. This is one of our examples of our riparian buffers in a recreational park area. The contributing area is the sub-watershed area that surrounds the BMP. So this is the area that the water flows over to our BMP. Contributing areas include, but are not limited to, concrete, parking lots, roadways, as well as compacted soils or lawns. This would be an example in this park area. Our contributing area is actually recreational lawn, highly fertilized, highly compacted. Moving into our methods of assessing these practices, we first looked at infiltration as a performance parameter. The velocity at which water enters the soil profile is known as the soil infiltration rate, and it's an indicator of how the soil's ability to allow water to move through the soil's pore space. Soil water infiltration and storage are necessary for root uptake, plant growth, and organism habitat. Infiltration tests were ran at all 8 of our locations, including the applicable contributing areas. And uniform rainfall application was applied using this Cornell sprinkle infiltrometer. You can see that it's this cylindrical water reservoir that has this perforated bottom. It's kind of hard to see on this photo here. And then this whole thing sits on this metal ring that's inserted halfway into the ground. And this is the area that our simulated rainfall rains onto. So this is a diagram of the infiltrometer. There's an outflow hole cut about halfway up the side of this metal ring that's inserted into the ground. And in the outflow hole, an effluent tube is attached, and this is where we're collecting our runoff water. So any water that's raining down and not infiltrating to the ground is what we're calling our runoff water. Here's a chart describing our different parameters that we observed in our experiment. The X's indicate topics that I'm going to be addressing today, while the O's are topics that we're still evaluating. I'm just not going to get to today. Surface soil samples were collected immediately adjacent to the location of the 3 infiltrometer tests at all the sites to determine the bulk density, the particle size analysis, and the soil water content preceding the infiltration measurements. Pollutants in the soil and water samples, such as nutrients, gasolines, metals, hydrocarbons, were also determined from the BMPs and that runoff water collected because of their close proximity to roadways and parking lots where vehicles are found. A linear mixed effects model was used to assess the average infiltration rate, the runoff volume, the time to runoff, as well as certain pollutant concentrations that we found in our runoff water samples. We assess these parameters by the 3 practices against their contributing areas, with the riparian buffer being evaluated into its 2 separate zones, both a wooded zone and a prairie zone. That's better described here in these photos, where this whole thing is our riparian buffer, and the yellow zone is the wooded zone of the buffer, and the pink zone is our prairie zone of the buffer. So as we move into our results, we'll go over a series of box plots addressing our different performance parameters. Here's a box plot organized by the practices below. They're a little hard, small to see here, but we have the biocell. The biocell's contributing area is determined by the purple. The prairie, and the prairie's contributing area in green, the wooded part of the buffer, and the prairie part of the buffer in orange and yellow. This is a distribution of the bulk density measurements that we found, with bulk density being the box plot, and then also the soil water content indicated by its means by the blue squares. Like any standard box plot, the boxes represent 50% of the data, and the upper and lower whiskers represent any maximum and minimum values we saw. Our bulk density measurements and soil water content revealed to us that there were areas of low infiltration and that these may be both a result of compacted soil as well as the native soil composition. We did find a somewhat strong relationship in the bulk density and the soil water content for both the biocell and the wooded buffer zones, so the purple and the orange. The difference between the simulated rainfall rate and the runoff rate is the rate of infiltration into the soil profile. So we determined an average rate of infiltration from each test at each site and plotted the distribution again by practices below. You can see here that the left axis represents the infiltration rate in centimeters per an hour. And for these values, we saw quite different values. For the biocells, we saw 35 centimeters per an hour on average. For the prairie, we saw 15 centimeters per an hour on average, 20 centimeters and 10 centimeters for the two buffer zones of the riparian buffer. We found that both the bioretention cells and the wooded zones of the buffers, which are the purple and orange again, both had significantly higher average infiltration rates compared to their contributing area counterparts. So that's the colors next to them. The average infiltration rate has a close indirect relationship with the average runoff volume for each site as expected. And so the runoff volume is that volume that, again, we collected from the effluent tube, any water that didn't infiltrate into the ground. We made sure we collected it. Here on the axis is in milliliters, and similarly we found that the contributing areas, so these guys up here, of both the bioretention and the wooded zones of the buffer, again, had significantly greater volumes of runoff water than their counterpart BMPs. Likewise, time to runoff was also evaluated. Time to runoff is the time at which water begins to flow out that effluent tube. So the time that infiltration stops and then we start receiving that runoff water. So any time that we received 100% infiltration, that was an absent value for time to runoff. But for these instances, we censored the values so that the time at which we ended the observation instead, we used that value for the time to runoff. So if a observation ran for 40 minutes and we had 100% of infiltration during that time, we recorded that time to runoff as 40 minutes for the purposes of the data analyses. These results were quite variable, as you can see. We observed that some bioretention cells and restored prairie areas had quite high times to runoff, around 40 minutes. But within these same practices and same observations, we saw quite low times to runoff, around 3 to 9 minutes. However, with outliers removed, we can see that most of the practices had significant or close to significantly longer times to runoff than their contributing area counterparts. We also did not find a strong relationship between time to runoff and bulk density. In an attempt to determine if the runoff water was accumulating any pollutants or fertilizers as it was flowing over the water surface, we also analyzed that runoff water for concentrations of total phosphorus, nitrates, and chlorides. Here we only have present nitrate concentrations from that runoff water. There were some significant differences in the nitrate concentrations in the runoff in the two buffer zones compared to their contributing areas. This is likely due to the fact that our contributing areas were highly maintained fertilized lawns. So in summary, among the soil characteristics, we observed the largest differences in bulk density and water content within our biocells. Within our performance characteristics, and these would be average infiltration, time to runoff, or runoff volume, we saw the strongest and most consistent differences within the biocells and the wooded zones of the buffer, between those practices and their respective contributing areas. We did see fewer significant differences detected between the prairie areas, either acting alone as a buffer, or alone as a BMP, or as part of the buffer system. It should also be mentioned that our analyses are still ongoing and we have a lot of parameters that we just haven't been able to cover yet. These include soil metal concentrations, nutrients, hydrocarbon concentrations, as well as looking at that infiltrated water and what was going on within the soil profile. To conclude, we found that the biocells in the wooded zones of the buffers infiltrated more water than their surrounding contributing environments. This may be because the bioretention cells were designed with an engineered soil mixture so that sandy composition of that soil could have aided to the success in the infiltration rates. We also noticed that prairie zones, either acting as a BMP themselves or as a buffer, did not perform much differently than their contributing counterpart areas. We can recognize, however, that turf lawns, which made up all of our contributing areas, despite being a permeable surface, did not act as a high-performance infiltration mechanism to stormwater management. Overall, we do want to leave you with the thought that sustainable development industry is constantly adopting new practices. However, there is still a need for extensive research in best management practices and how they influence the large-scale issue of stormwater control in urban environments. Recognizing that integrating stormwater management strategies in the early site of planning and design is imperative, and knowing the function and space available for implementation of BMPs depends on the watershed that you're working within. Practices such as this biocell can be easily retrofitted into any parking lot. It's these distributed micro-scale practices that are located as close to the source of stormwater creation as possible that can together act as a comprehensive stormwater management system. It's through this conscious, environmentally sensitive design that we can focus on the prevention of land and water degradation rather than mitigation and remediation. Just to thank some of our sponsors who have helped funded our research, the Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship, the Center for Global and Regional Environmental Research, the National Laboratory for Agriculture and the Environment, as well as my home department, Natural Resources, Ecology and Management. Thank you very much for attending. I'm happy to answer any questions, and these are my contact information below. Thank you.
Any questions for Camille?
Yeah.
I'm sorry if I missed it, but did you say exactly how long these have been established before?
Yeah, so the bioretention cells were all designed in implemented in 2011, and then our prairies and riparian buffers were sometime between 2004 and 2007.
For the biocell, do you know what kind of upkeep or maintenance has occurred in the past 5 years?
Yeah, the question was if the biocells are maintained or haven't been maintained throughout the years after they were established. To my knowledge, there's been very limited maintenance. I actually know one of our sites is just a neighborhood maintenance that someone that lives in the neighborhood took on themselves. But to my knowledge, no, there's not a ton of maintenance.
Any further questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Camille.